Hello and welcome to today's MediaWorks masterclass. It feels like we've been a bit of a journey with SEO, Jack. Today we're going to be finishing off and rounding off our SEO series, and we're going to talk about the future of search marketing, the role of LLMs, and really what does sort of AI mean in terms of an SEO space. Again, I know we've talked about this on the previous sessions, but we are also going to be offering a bespoke, tailored, free review of the impact that LLMs are having on your SEO activity. So if you want any specific insights that relate to your organization, then please do click the link that's in the chat. We'll share this at the end. We'll also share it via email for those that can't attend today. And again, just to reiterate, this is the final session in the SEO Masterclass series where we've seen over 1,000 people join us to talk about SEO over the last few weeks, which has been really exciting, really interesting. We started talking about digital infrastructure, focused then on content. Then we talked about DPR and what's happening in the DPR space. But today we finish with the future of search marketing. And really, we alluded to this, I think, as we've been through a lot of the other sessions. We've sort of dabbled and talked a little about AI, but not really done a full session on what it means. So again, there's going to be a real focus on that. I'd like to do a few introductions. So everybody who doesn't know me, my name's David Norris. I'm the Group Operations Director here at MediaWorks, and I'll be hosting the session today. I've also got Jack with me.
Yes, I'm Jack Minott. So co-hosting the SEO masterclass sessions over the last kind of 2 months or so. And yeah, I'm the Organic Search Director here at MediaWorks.
And then what we've done is in each of the sessions, we've brought a guest along. And today we're joined by Dan. So Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hello, I'm Daniel. I'm CTO at MediaWorks. And I'm going to chat to Jack around how AI is changing the SEO world.
Fantastic. So I guess, look, we've sort of rolled with this and utilized this as the way that we structure, where we conceptualize SEO here at MediaWorks. So again, just to reiterate, we've talked technical, we focused on on-site and content, what we could do there. We then looked at off-site, but really today it's very much focusing on that advancement piece. So again, sort of very much what's new in this space, what's actually taking place, like what are the new trends that we're seeing? What's the new tech that's out there? Again, probably couldn't have any conversation in 2025 and new tech without mentioning AI. And then also thinking about things like entity and niche targeting. But today we really are going to focus on the way that SEO has changed and is evolving. And I think that's a really interesting conversation that we've had with lots of people who've signed up for audits and have had with lots of clients over the last sort of 6-12 months as well.
Right, so yeah, just kicking us straight in then. So, although I kind of said this may be a bit strong, but search is being reinvented. AI, LLMs are reshaping the search landscape, whether that be through AI overviews or even how people are actually searching using things like ChatGPT or Gemini to actually obviously interface with information and their searches. And yeah, I think Apple came out the other day and said their organic traffic has dropped for the first time in over a decade.
And I think for me as well, it's always really important. We've often talked about the business models behind these organizations as well. Like we've seen Google introduce more AI into their search functionality. We've seen sort of LLMs and the likes of ChatGPT are yet to really understand the full monetization model, in my opinion. So we're seeing like changes there. So again, it's really interesting to understand the context, I think, that in which the ecosystem operates. And again, that's probably why we are seeing, I say, a bit of fragmentation, but also a bit of testing and learning and trial and more invention and innovation than we've probably seen before.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's been quite different in the stages we've seen in things like Google rolling out what they've done. But I think there probably is a bit of a dichotomy in Google itself around their traditional search model being disrupted and actually the search team probably not working in collaboration with the AI team. And actually what we've seen is different things being inserted on the page. And actually they haven't got around to the point of understanding how do we fully monetize this yet, but we know we have to do it. So that's where we're seeing. And I think over the next few weeks, they've changed their logo. It's very aligned to Gemini. I think we're going to see, okay, how does Google really bring this in as its core part of its business model?
Yeah. So I guess for us then, it's about the first point, I think, is there might be people listening in who are sat going, what are we talking about when we say LLMs and how do they actually impact things like search? So I think what we wanted to do was really showcase sort of the brains behind sort of the new wave of search, if you like.
Yeah, so LLMs are effectively, as we've put on the screen there, AI models trained on vast amounts of text, data, typically the internet. Yeah, really designed to kind of understand, generate, and create outputs through text at the moment. And yeah, the examples really that we're working with that are, very widely available is ChatGPT from OpenAI, Google, and there's a few others like Claude out there as well. But yeah, nowhere near the same amount of pickup as ChatGPT, as that is by far the most popular. In terms of search, like we said, we've just been seeing this introduction of AI overviews. That is this generative result, which obviously right at the top of the page, which we will go into a lot in detail in a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the biggest thing I think we're seeing from Google search, is that kind of AI overview piece. And then yeah, is then impacting our strategies in terms of, well, how do we get into them? And obviously that's what we'll go through later. And actually, how do we potentially target them? Because I think there's still a bit of kind of fogginess around where this is going and how we actually, get into those results and what that means from a performance metric as well.
Yeah, I think we've probably always had a bit of a debate, haven't we, around what's the algorithm and how does it all fit together and stitch together and the weight in between the different ranking factors. But I think, again, we're going to talk quite a lot about content and digital PR and how they're sort of are I'm not going to say the most important factors, but definitely two key variables that are impacting things like where do the LLMs get their information from, how do they surface that information. I think that's one of the key things I think we really want to draw out today. So I guess when we're talking about sort of Google's AI overviews or AIOs, it's often referred to. So we're going to see loads and loads of acronyms as we go through. So I can only apologise for that, but we will explain them as we go. And then obviously AI mode. So again, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, Jack, to look at sort of the Google's AI overview, so AIO, and what that's doing to the SERP.
Yeah, I think just to very plainly put it out there, when we talk about this, it is that kind of top right image where Google is generating that response based on your input. And actually, again, it is just that new position 0 potentially. Well, it is, quite frankly. I don't think it's kind of theoretical at this point. But it shifts the focus away from, the classic 10 blue links or even that classic, also asked or instant answer feature to now getting your result, getting that answer right at the top of the page without you needing to kind of take a further action potentially. Or kind of
and I think the big thing for me here to highlight really is just that SERP that we're seeing and the results page is really becoming very different in terms of the different types of content that we see. For example, Dan, I know you've been in the SEO space for approaching 20 years, but it has massively evolved, hasn't it, over time? And I'm thinking about the different functionality that we're now seeing in there and how AI is really impacting that.
Yeah, totally. I think it's not new that the SERPs have changed. We've always seen different things come in. I think the difference here is that we're seeing a lot more information at the top that could service the query in itself, which is different. And I think, actually what we see is this is a lot more personalized and it's a lot more focused around what a user might need. So it does push a lot more stuff down. We'll talk about things like driving less traffic. So again, I think this is an area where, we're just seeing a fundamental change in terms of how that SERP looks.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for me though is Google is still saying that from their perspective they are seeing like record amounts of search queries go in. So they're saying like I think what was the number that we talked about?
15 trillion a year.
Yeah, 15 trillion a year. Yeah,
but I think in itself though that doesn't necessarily suggest that there's more traffic going elsewhere. What that actually means is people could be changing how they search. They might be doing more queries. They're using search more, or they're using search in different ways because of the different features coming in. Yeah. So I do think there needs to be an understanding that just query growth doesn't necessarily mean that there is more traffic going around on the open web. Yeah. So that's a key part.
It's also worth mentioning here that at the moment there's no part of Search Console that actually specifically measures AI overviews. So the data it's just not non-existent. Obviously, you can see it in Search Console in terms of click-through rates and impressions and that kind of thing.
It's blended together, so we can't necessarily dissect from first-party data how AIOs are impacting us, other than looking quite isolated in that we ranked well. Now AIOs are appearing. What does that look like? Is a difference in click-through rates and what have you?
Yeah. No, I think it is. It's interesting. And I think when we talk about optimizing for AIO, I think we've been offering this guidance for a while, haven't we, Jack, around like, so what should people be thinking about in terms of, you know, a question that we're often getting asked is, how do we get our results to appear in that little nice blue box at the top of the page?
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, the fundamentals haven't changed. It is just, you know, well-written, clear answer, specific content that is, you know, has integrity and isn't, you know, copied from another place or kind of stitched together. And we are putting those kind of strong EEAT signals out there, whether it be kind of the digital footprint and the authority that your site has, and just blending it as we normally would in an SEO strategy. And then we do have some more technical elements, things like schema markup, structured data, which obviously a bit more of an explicit signal. But again, that's not new, is it?
No, I think the thing for me is, as you say, we talked about it with clients for years, but this idea of you're really not trying to answer individual queries. You're trying to understand what is the answer that someone needs. How do we bucket all these together and be as relevant as we can for the things that people are searching for? And that relevance is the key bit, but also understanding that these LLMs do actually use search in the background to help ground what they do. But actually what they're not doing that against is one query. They're fanning that out to lots of queries. And actually, you know, what we need to have is enough breadth and enough information gain, stuff that's new that suggests that the LLM should surface us.
And I think a key one for me is, I think pre-Christmas, we working with a client, and what we saw was AI overview came up for a particular query, and we got asked a question. I remember it quite prominently around the client saying, but I'm position sort of 1, 2, like I'm position 1, 2, or 3. I'm around that area for this, and that result that it's drawing from, like that website that it's drawing from, doesn't even rank on the first 3 pages. It's like outside the top 30 results. And I think what we are seeing as it's getting gradually better and more refined is we are seeing a greater correlation with the data that's being pulled into those things like AI overviews and organic rankings themselves. So you are seeing that sort of crystallization around a bit of a methodology in the background, although probably we don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen some stuff recently with the DOJ stuff, and actually what we can see is some of those search signals that they use are being used within what they do within AIOs. Yeah. So actually they are looking at some of the quality signals and that kind of stuff. And I think the important bit there is that we know AI can generate a lot of inaccuracies or not necessarily the best answer. So we've had 2 to 3 decades of Google looking at how do they eliminate spam, how do they give the best result, how do they bring that into their kind of infrastructure for Gemini. And I think that's where the difference is between, you know, the long-term view of actually this is what Google's got as the core. ChatGPT don't. They're relying on Bing to be their grounding for search. So I definitely think that is an area where we're seeing a correlation. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing it will show in the search in the AIO, but it is a core part.
So I guess then a conversation for me would be around what is sort of Google's AI mode. It's something that we're hearing more and more about. So do you want to just take us through that, Jack?
Yeah, so this is which I need to confirm, but is in labs at the moment.
Yes, it's for people that have premium Google within the United States.
Yeah, so only available in the US, and is Google's new AI, what I would call it, SERP result, which basically blends and changes based on your input and your search query, inputting information or references effectively what you're searching, but it is a fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Conversive way of manipulating results. But it is, again, for certain results, still in that SERP format in some cases. But again, also flicks to more of that conversational format as well.
And there's a lot of conversation about this right now, isn't there? Because they are starting to roll this out in the US. So again, we often see then further global adoption.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously it's in labs, so it's really in beta and it's being tested on users, see how that looks. But you are seeing people that are opted in that actually instead of a search button, when you land on the Google homepage, you get an AI mode button. So they're really trying to draw people down to this. And I think this could be what they're looking as their differentiator to really be the alternative to ChatGPT, because it is immersive. It allows you to stay within that kind of one window, but give you different views. It's hyper personalized. It does a lot around local. And these pages are still linking out. I think, you know, we're talking about traffic potentially going down, but they are still linking out to the open web, not in the same velocity that they were. But also, if we think about a lot of the stuff that was kind of out there that was more informational, it might have driven traffic, but did it really drive sales?
Yeah.
So I think that's potentially what we'll see more of when we look at AI mode, and we'll come on to how we measure this kind of stuff.
Thank you. So I guess the rise of zero-click searches and shifting metrics, Jack, we've talked about this. We introduced sort of zero-click searches on a previous slide there, but yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think one of those where zero-click isn't new, but I think we're seeing a more aggressive stance, like I said, with AI views coming in and with, less need to potentially click off that search result. It is just, more prevalent than ever. And like I said, we can't, in isolation, kind of measure AI views at the moment, but like as we said, we can see click-through rates decreasing, impressions going up on certain queries, which are more likely or do have an AI view in them. So it's just understanding, actually, and I think it sets up kind of the next part of the conversation of where that value now lands. If we aren't getting the clicks, but you're getting that visibility or those brand impressions, is there value in that, or is there value for your business or your brand? And what does that look like for you, really?
Yeah. And again, just to sort of talk about the redefining of search success, again, you've teased some of those points there, Jack, but what are some of the changes that we're seeing versus sort of some of the newer metrics or different ways to measure SEO performance, if you like?
Yeah, I guess it's, traditionally I've always thought visibility as a metric is associated with clicks. The higher visibility, the higher the clicks. Whereas I think now it is that change, that visibility doesn't mean clicks, it means literally visibility in terms of how visible, how many impressions are you getting in the search results. And then, it's really then how are we looking at, there's been discussion around SEO being more of a brand channel and moving towards that rather than performance. But yeah, it's one of those where I guess I don't have the answer just yet in terms of, what metric is key coming out of this. But it's just interesting to figure out or see the data that we are getting and actually, measure it against our classic metrics.
Yeah, and I think it does sort of blend more, doesn't it, between that brand and performance conversation that we've probably had quite a lot in the paid space, to be honest, historically.
Awareness campaigns,
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, isn't it, to look at this, Dan, and think about how we measure SEO performance, like historically, but also moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a legacy thing around the metrics that have always existed for SEO, but in theory, it's always been a brand channel, really. We've done a lot around informational content. And the purpose there was really to get your brand in front of people early in their journey. We talked about the messy middle, all of the different channels people would use. This is just another way of getting in front of customers, and it might not drive initially traffic, but if we're getting in front of them at the right stage in their journey, is that going to lead us further down the line when they are now, multi-channel in terms of how they do stuff? And, we talk about some people getting their answer purely from ChatGPT, fine, but that might not be the journey that we need to be on. But there's other sectors, automotive or travel, where people are visiting 12 to 40 different places in that research space and then probably not going to make a decision off one answer.
Yeah.
So making sure that we're there as much as we can across that journey is going to be important.
Yeah, and ultimately understanding sort of, as you say, your full funnel experience as well. Like, again, it might be that at an awareness stage, we're not driving as many clicks to the website, but actually at a conversion level, it's never been more important to have a website that converts and we know exactly what we want to compete on and not compete on. Because again, the transaction can't happen in terms of in the SERP itself. You have to obviously dig down and go to the website.
And I think the other thing is like what type of content you're producing. A lot of people here were just talking about pure text-based pages, but there's lots of stuff around images, there's lots of stuff around video. Like, how do we do stuff that is valuable just to get in front of the end user? And they might be in different parts of Google, but they're going to be parts that Google link to in things like AI mode. And there's things where we need to just make sure that we're there when the customer's looking.
Yeah, I think there's a good point that what we've seen is that messy middle, as you said, Dan, is like there are some informational queries which are commercially led. So if you're looking for the 10 best SUVs, we've seen it, that may have an AI overview, but people are still clicking onto those informational pages where trusted sources and publications, which they know they're going to get potentially the answer that aligns with them the most.
Totally.
So, it's not all zero-click doom and gloom.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. It's just, again, it's just understanding that model. And I think it's really important that businesses really do understand, again, where that information sits, how do they book it, how do they structure it, what's the format of the information that they want to share, etc. Because I do think it's that production of high quality content is still massively the driver for the vast majority of everything that we're talking about. So I guess the other aspect, so we talked a bit about sort of content there, but I think for me, like when we're talking about offsite and authority building activity, it's really interesting, isn't it, to see sort of some of the changes that are taking place there, Jack?
Yeah, so it's just about how, like we said, the fundamentals aren't changing in terms of, building your digital footprint, using citations, using digital PR to get, your brand out there and align it with certain specific topics or industry publications, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's one of those. On the next slide, I think we've got actually why is it actually critical. So yeah, it is about being a credible source. As we said, EEAT right at the beginning of this kind of presentation is that's not going anywhere, and obviously that is showing your experience, your expertise, your authoritativeness and your trustworthiness, which is primarily generated by those offsite signals. And then, as Dan was talking about, there is a lot of misinformation being spread by generative results, and actually by having credible citations, credible offsite, you are going to be seen as a trusted entity.
Yeah, and I think that refinement of that process is really key here, isn't it? Because again, we might be seeing sort of misinformation and like in certain results or spurious results where you sat there going, well, that isn't anything like the query that I've put in. But I do think there is a bit here where it's about how do we actually make sure that we've got the content there, that we get the results to be better from a Google perspective so that people are getting more of the information that they want? Because I go back to it, Google's a user experience. They want people to engage with the platform. So if they're getting bad results, the opportunity to go elsewhere is massively increased. So I think that refinement over a period of time, so you're getting better, high quality results through these different activities, and particularly from AI is so important.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing around authority is two parts. One is they're using it to make sure the most relevant sites get shown up rather than stuff that the LLM is seeing more frequently or thinks is answering the query or the prompt. I think the other side is just how frequently a brand is seen as well. So, like I think, again, if we go back to legacy SEO, it was kind of like DPR was all about just getting links, quality, then we talk about quality, but then the other piece is actually it's about being seen as a brand. It is kind of a bit more traditional PR, and actually what we know is that the LLMs are looking at the open web, and if they're seeing you talked about in lots of places around these things, it's kind of the concept of what we've always had, and Google still looks at things like PageRank in a form, that kind of idea of, okay, well, the brand is always talked about and relevant in these contexts, so making sure that what we're doing and getting authority around just needs to be relevant, which is kind of that piece around EAT.
Yeah, and it's an important point, Dan, because we touched on this in the last session, didn't we? Around yes, link building still has an absolute place, as part of this, but it's about some of those traditional metrics, things like coverage, etc., are now sort of playing more into this in terms of where people are getting their information from. So I think it's a really interesting development that we are seeing. So I guess into that then, sort of, we are talking about beyond traditional link building, aren't we, Jack?
So it is talking about, as we just said, that the power of brand mentions. So again, how often, how frequently is the brand being mentioned and recognized as a brand? And then, that again, we've talked about is that EEAT principle. So in terms of, do we have credentials? Do we have authors posting credible content? Are there case studies, testimonials that are telling, AI search engines that we are a real business, with real things happening, as well as contributions, as well as having very clear and transparent contacts and about information as well. So fundamentally, it's all still there.
It's all still there, and I think it's just about making sure, again, that we're adopting those best practices and really doubling down in terms of making sure that we've got all of these bases covered. I think is, for me, one of the key things that, again, it goes back to making sure you have a real good grasp of how are you appearing, how are you showing, what is your process around producing content, like, again, what type of content do we want to show, formats versus typology, etc. Is it informational, is it transactional? Again, having a really good grasp of all of that, for me, is going to be so important as we move forward. So I guess then the future of SEO, EO and GEO, so should we define what they are? So we all know what SEO is.
So AEO is answer engine optimization, and then GEO is generative engine optimization.
Yes. For me, they're all one and the same. I think there's a lot of acronyms going around what this is, LLM optimization. I think fundamentally what SEO was always about was getting in front of the user when they were searching for something that they needed.
Yeah.
And obviously the core way of doing that has always been, when Google's had over 80% market share, was a search engine. We're always seeing now is fragmentation of how people search for things. So for me, they are one and the same.
Yeah. So I guess that it moves us on there nicely into, there's a lot of sort of doomsday messaging, isn't there, that you see online on LinkedIn about search is dead, this is taking over here, etc. I think we just want to put our view out there is like, we don't think it's dying at all. It's actually just evolving, and arguably it is getting slightly more complex in terms of sort of the different areas that you've got to think about in terms of, as you say, might not all happen in one particular format. It's not so text heavy anymore. But again, that's a movement that we've seen for the last 3, 4, 5 years at least. So again, sort of, I think what we wanted to highlight really was just to really highlight the fundamentals that we just want to go through.
Yeah, I think look, it's all the, like I said, all the things we've been talking about for years, and it is the fundamentals, but there are some core things changing. So like technical, yes, crawlability, indexability, site speed, obviously will all still be here, but we do have new things like the LLM.txt kind of file, as well as, ChatGPT putting out that they are returning that shopping feed. So now we can submit, or the interest form to submit shopping feeds to them is now open.
Core tech SEO is still massively important. We talked about schema before, so a lot of it applies.
But similarly, on-page optimization again, don't get me wrong, we have, made different changes. We have, starting writing potentially more conversationally, starting to be, as Dan was saying there, owning a topic a little bit more and actually giving kind of a full 360 view. But again, I think from a very comprehensive SEO strategy, that's not something which should be new or is anything different. But there are these different potential nuances to it when we think about the new features.
And that's similar, isn't it, into the user experience as a key factor. We've known user experience has been a key factor for a long time and still remains exactly the same, really, in the sense that I go back to, it's about Google's user experience, but also then how do you play into Google's user experience? Yeah,
and we know, for example, like, a page that we have for one of our clients is they have a table of information which is conversion data, and we know that has over 300 keywords ranking just for table data, and that feature as a UX page element performs very well in AI overviews. So there are some nuances to be made, but it's ultimately still trying to provide that key user experience.
It might be some stuff around structured data. It could be the LLMs.txt file. So there's a lot of stuff changing, and I think it is an evolving landscape. So we just need to keep up with how fast this technology evolves.
Yeah, and I think that leads us nicely down on that final point, really, around adapting to the new SERP features and formats. I think, again, this has been something that's evolved over the years and will continue to evolve. And again, do we know where it's going to be in 2 or 3 years down the line? No, we can't predict that at all. But what I do think is it is going to be about making sure that you are reviewing your sort of SEO activity and SEO performance against these new SERP functionalities and SERP features, and making sure that you've got the coverage that works for your business and your business model. Because again, not all the features that are in sort of a SERP appear for every search. It's very tailored, and it is going to become more and more customized, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just, don't just think about the 10 blue links, think about all of the things that are surfaced, and how do we get as much brand visibility as we can.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think that's a nice way to sort of finish off and wrap up this SEO Masterclass series. I think, again, thank you for everybody that's joined us over that period of time. Again, thanks to everybody who's asked for specific audits and follow-up chats. I know I've had some great conversations. You've had some great conversations with clients and also people who are just wanting some advice and guidance in this space. But again, just to reiterate, on the back of this session, if you do want to book up to talk to one of the team about LLMs and the impact it's having on your SEO activity, then please do click on the link and we'll arrange that sort of 30-minute session. And again, I just want to reiterate to come back and join me. I think I'm back on later down the line on the 28th of June. I think it might actually be slightly earlier than that. But again, we'll confirm all of those pieces around enhancing your website accessibility. So again, looking at working with our partner ReciteMe and looking at, again, what that information is and how the Accessibility Act that's coming into play is going to change all things accessibility on the web. But yeah, thank you very much for your input into these sessions, and I hope to see you next time for the next MediaWorks Masterclass. Thank you.
Cheers.